Okay, so today our lecture is titled Beads and All Things Pretty African Fashion, a Case of Onyoka Beads. Loini and I will be talking about basically onyoka beads, but obviously for context and to give you a bit of background on the work that we deal with, we'll start off giving you an overview of the African fashion, and then we'll move closer to what our subject matter is, which is onyoka beads. Okay, another location that is probably further from all of us right now, but in spirit, Loini and I, we're very much connected. This is where we come from, Namibia, and it's a country in the southern part of Africa. As you can see on the map, it's highlighted in green. It's a country that has many contrast beauty, both in people and also in the environment. So you can see on the map, on the west we've got the coast, and then on the east side is land locked with neighboring other African countries. Mostly it's desert, but the people live almost in the whole part of the country. So we have about 13 ethnical groups in the country, and depending on where they live, it also shows in the type of clothing that they wear, the traditional clothing that they wear. So it's kind of making use of what is available to you in your environment, and it shows in very contrasting different ways and beautiful ways. Although they might use the same type of material and the same elements, but each group kind of translates it in their own way. And I think beading is one element that shows us how people actually can work with the same thing, but then they translate it and make it their own identity, So yeah, so today's presentation or lecture, we'll look at Africa fashion. I'll talk about a little bit of what is Africa fashion. I don't think I need to really delve into that and give a long explanation of that. As fashion experts and students, I'm sure you're quite aware when we talk about Africa fashion, what I'm referring to. And then I'll look at Afropolitan fashion for the global market. What is that and how does it look like at the moment? And we'll look at the African beads as an African signature element that most of the designers use in their clothing. And then we'll move closer to onyoka beads. So beads in Namibian traditional clothing, how it's used. And then Loini will also give us a quite detailed research on onyoka beads. It's one of our current research projects that we are working and publishing on, and we found quite interesting information that we'll share with you today. Yeah, to start off, Africa has quite been an inspiration for most of, or not most, but for some European fashion brands. So this is work by Yves Saint Laurent, a collection that he presented in 1967. And you can see the details in this image. He was inspired by Africa. He has been quite having a very sweet connection with Africa, and I believe he was also given a piece of land or a property in Morocco. So every now and then, Yves Saint Laurent used to go to Morocco and just delve into the culture and the beauty in the people, and he would be so inspired. So when he comes there, he collect all this inspiration and creates beautiful collections out of them. So Yves Saint Laurent was one of the pioneer designers who started using Africa as a fashion inspiration, and then more designers followed after that, and at some point it started going a bit like left, not so pleasant. So European brands, when they continued using Africa as an inspiration, at some point there were these clashes because African people started feeling like they were being used as a backdrop for inspiration, as a prop in their fashion campaigns, and not real benefit was trickling down to the ethnic people of Africa. This is an example of Valentino, who did a collection in 2016. His inspiration was Africa, very beautiful collection. And then they decided they were going to do the editorial campaign for this fashion collection, shooting it in Kenya. So they traveled to Kenya and they actually found a remote rural place in Kenya where they shot this campaign. When it started being screened on the social media, on their website, the Kenyans were not very happy with this because, as you can see from this image, there are Maasai men and women there, but it's almost like it's a prop for the bigger image that they actually promoting their fashion brand. And there was quite an uproar about that, and I think they actually did pull down some of the campaigns, and because it was just not a pleasant feeling for everyone who looked at it. And I think speaking about the internet opening up spaces, I think before the internet, this opportunity wouldn't have arrived for Africans to actually speak up that this is actually not ethically right. But with the global, the internet space global opening up to everyone, they were able to actually voice out that actually this is not okay. You cannot come and do this and you think we'll be happy with it. So more designers like Vivienne Westwood in 2020, he launched this collection through his ethical fashion campaign project. She actually started working with this community in Kenya. That was in 2010. So over the space of 10 years, eventually after 10 years, we started seeing tangible results out of this project. So she was going to Kenya, meeting Kenyan women and working with the women and trying to come up with something that's really going to bring real benefits to the women. So they trained women into manufacturing these handbags. So a lot of Kenyan women actually benefited from this campaign where they would be paid to produce these handbags. And I think this is one of the collaborations that we look out of and appreciate, because you can see where the tangible benefits is going. So it's not just this big international fashion brand coming to use Africa as a backdrop to get all the benefits from this, but you could see that at least there's some tangible profit remaining with the people from Kenya, and the women in those production teams are able to earn a source of living from it. So all of this that has been happening in the global fashion market, there's many more examples of that, but I think as we talk and travel and more fashion opportunities and platforms are opening all over the world, not just in the Western, but also in the African continent, we see that there's actually a bit of change in how fashion brands are producing and how fashion brands are marketing their fashion in the global market. So I would like to draw your attention to Africa Fashion International. It's a fashion platform that is from South Africa. They started their work in 2007 because they realized a lot of African brands who produce African fashion out of Africa are mostly excluded from the global market, global fashion market. So Africa Fashion International, their goal was to create a platform that can promote African brands on an international market and a global market where they can actually start selling their products onto the international global market. So their first attempt was to obviously, we all look at Paris as the center of fashion. We still look at Paris as the fashion capital. So their first attempt was they traveled with some designers from South Africa to attend Paris Fashion Week, and they showcased some of those brands there. And although it was a success, but they soon realized that that was not going to work for the African brands, and that model is simply created for the fashion brands in the West and North, and we simply on different time zones. So even manufacturing, when you look at it, it doesn't translate the same way. Our seasons are different and so on. So there was just too many complications that were not really translating well. So in 2009 presented a very lucrative opportunity for African brands to actually showcase, because around about that time what was happening was the world was gearing up for the World Cup 2010. So in 2009, a lot of African business people realized, okay, if 2010 World Cup is going to happen in South Africa, we are basically the center of attention right now. So we should look at how do we promote Africa? How do we promote not just fashion, but Africa as a global brand? Because everyone right now is looking at Africa. So one of the huge campaign was to bring design and present design to the world, African design to the world. So fashion designers, people were also trying to create lodging spaces like housing and temporary lodging like Airbnb and so on. So it was really a whole holistic kind of campaign that was happening. So I'm just going to look at Africa Fashion, what they did and how they actually made use of this to benefit African brands. So in 2009, I was privileged to actually participate in that show. So they invited African brands all over the continent. So they decided they were not going to only concentrate on South African brands, but they were going to try and invite fashion brands from Northern Africa, West Africa, East, all over Africa to come to Johannesburg and put up a show. And the show, I think it ran for 2 weeks. Every day they were showcasing African brands from one part or the other. But they also did invite African brands that were producing in the diaspora. So it's not just only the African brands that were producing in Africa. And that was a huge success. All the media, like I said, because of the World Cup, everyone was talking about Africa. So it was all over the media. And then in 2010, again, they presented now another second Africa Fashion Week, which was around about the same time the World Cup was happening. And with that, it just made it more of a success. A lot of brands were able now to even sell some of their market to the global market, because with these shows, they invited all buyers from all over the world. So some designers slowly started seeing the results of that, and they were able to stock some of their garments and fashion items out, on the global market. And you can see from the timeline, so in 2019, they were able to even host more activities and present more fashion platforms to the designers. So within a span of 10 years, you could see slowly there was more that they could offer to the fashion brands, African fashion brands. And they've just been moving on, moving on. My timeline only stops in 2022, but I know this year, 2024, there were also some fashion houses that were able to showcase in Paris. Actually, Paris came and said, let's do this together. How do we actually bring some of the African brands to present their collection at the Paris Fashion Week? So you can kind of see that Africa Fashion International, they were able to really, really turn around the strategy to promote African brands for the global market. And with that, they drew on brands that were looking at products that were looking African, looking the inspiration into African heritage, because the global market is already full of Western looking fashion. So they're not looking more of that. They're definitely looking for something that's unique. So they were working with brands that their identity is rooted in the African cultural heritage. So beading, which is what we're talking about today, when we look at beading in the African continent, a lot of ethnic groups actually use beading for many, many uses. So it's a very integral part of traditional clothing in most of ethnic groups in Africa. So this image is showing us Xhosa men from South Africa draped and adorned in beads. So you can see from the regalia, even the scarves, they also have beading detail. For men, for boys and girls in every ethnic group, when they reach a certain stage where they are transitioning into adults, that period is actually marked with a certain ceremony. So for Xhosa men, they would usually go into the mountains to get them circumcised, and that marks actually your timeline that you are crossing over to be a real man. So through that initiation process, they are secluded from the community, and when they are there, they are taught everything about how to be a man and how to provide for your family. Uh, um, and then when they come back, obviously it's a celebration for the community. And when they arrive in that community, usually there's special clothing that they create for them that's waiting for them. So when they arrive, then they are given this special blankets, special beading to symbolize that they've just gone through their initiation process, because it's also important for the community to know and identify men that have just graduated from their initiation program. So they have to wear something that makes them look different. So this is just an image to show you how Xhosa men would be actually decorated in beading. So Xhosa is one of the fashion brands that actually took that story and that heritage and translated it into fashion. So he looked at the beading that Xhosa men would wear after the initiation program, and the blankets that they would also wear after the initiation program, and he translated into fashion, So he decided maybe it's a bit too clumsy if you have to walk around with your initiation blanket, It's heavy, and although it looks absolutely stunning, but some men who are much more active because of their lifestyle now, so they would prefer maybe a simpler form of fashion that can still be worn, and they'll still look very, very outstanding and stand out of the crowd that they actually just graduated from their ceremony. So he comes from a family that used to weave carpets. So his family used to weave a lot of carpets. And then, because he comes from that tradition, he decided to go into knitting. So he started knitting these jerseys that Xhosa men could wear and would make them look different because they just graduated from their initiation program. And soon after that, even that was his initial story, everyone just bought into the whole brand. They thought it was so forward thinking, very fashionable. So even women wanted a piece of the Xhosa jerseys or blankets and so on. So his brand just exploded. So he had all kinds of items. Obviously, the first items that he used to create were all knitted. They were all knitwear. But currently, he also has some printed textiles, but obviously the motifs and the colors are still this kind of feel. So it still carries the same aesthetics, from the beading to the knitting, and now printed textiles of Xhosa being made into all kinds of fashionable way. And he currently launched a fashion shop in New York. So this year he opened, I think he's one of the first South African brands to open a retail store in New York, selling African brands. So he also presented the collection also at Paris Fashion Week. And you can see, I just selected 3 items, and you can see the middle garment, you can see it's the Xhosa original blankets, but he cut it up and made it into a totally different fitted dress for a woman. So I think Xhosa is one of those African brands that has really illustrated how can a brand grow from a very powerful traditional story into a very, very global fashion, that everyone can consume. So in my opinion, Matoza by Laduma is one of the fashion brands that's really creating Afropolitan. Afropolitan is fashion that is created for anyone in any part of the world who likes to enjoy and have a piece of fashion that looks African but can be worn by anyone. So I think when fashion brands, African fashion brands started, they used to create for the cosmopolitan clique in any city. So if you look at Johannesburg, Sophia Town in the 1940s and 50s, they were wearing different. Those women who used to work in the cities and men who used to work in the cities, they looked dapper and they had their own style. So African brands started producing for that niche market, and that hasn't changed. So even now, when you look at people that are in the city, they like to dress very, very fashionable, you know. So for a long time, I think African brands used to produce for that niche market of the cosmopolitan. Mm-hmm. But at some point, I think with the World Cup, 2010 World Cup, things turned around. We realized many people on the global market also want a piece of Africa fashion. So then it became Afropolitan. So we're creating now fashion for the global market, no longer for the cosmopolitan city in Windhoek, in Joburg, or in Addis Ababa, but fashion that can be consumed by everyone globally and can be sold anywhere. So yeah. So in Namibia, we also have a couple of brands that have been looking at traditional clothing, looking at certain traditional elements to translate it into fashion. So Nayo is one of the brands that Loini started with a colleague, and they looked at beading, because in Namibia we have a lot of ethnic groups, and each ethnic group use the beads in a different way. So sometimes you can't really travel with your beads. You can see from what Loini is wearing and what I'm wearing. It's probably going to be your only hand luggage, and you can't, because it will be too heavy. You will say, no, you're over your limits. You can't pack the whole traditional garment. So Loini and a colleague thought of coming up with a textile that's printed with motifs and drawings of beads, and actually printed on a variety of fashion, you know, and it was very, very successful, and people could recognize, like, this is a, because all the adornment pieces made out of beads, they have name. Like onyoka is one that we talk about today, and you'll see, but you have onyoka, you have, you know, himba, they have the necklace that is also very unique and particular to them. In my ethnic group, we have what we call sihiho. It's a headdress, you know. But yeah, most of those items, for you to carry them and wear them wherever, sometimes it's too heavy to carry. So fashion brands like Nayo started coming up with a solution on how to actually print this traditional ornaments and create textiles out of it, that they can actually produce fashion garments out of it. And then I am a little bit stuck in my brain. This is this is what I did. I think this was my last, no, not my last, my second last collection that I did in 2017. Basically, I was looking at different ways of creating simple. I still try to go for simple, although some pieces were still not so simple. But again, using different types of beads, using them as decorating pieces on the garments, and some accessories are removable, just to kind of give that also easy access and easy carry and wear and use, you know, because our society has become such easygoing society, so they don't want anything that's gonna take long procession. Like maybe if I have to go to an auntie to put it on for me, that's too much. So in this collection, I tried to come up with pieces that you can quickly put on yourself and also remove yourself. And the colors, I also use natural dyes to dye the textiles. So I will hand over to Loini.
We are talking about beads because I've been saying this a couple of times. Namibian fashion should be about beadwork. Yeah. So right now, even for us as lecturers, we're teaching our students more to work with textiles. But if we go back into our history, it's the beading, it's the ornament. So that's what should be our identity. So I'm really happy that the whole theme about decolonizing kind of pushed us to revisit, to review what is it that we have, what were our ancestors using, yeah, why, and now we're able to share it on this global platform. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about, just give a brief background on the Namibian ethnic groups, not all of them, but just give you an idea. For example, what we have on the screen is example of the beadwork worn by the Kavango people. That's the group that Maria, the ethnic group that Maria belongs to. And you can see the exquisite beadworks, yeah, the patterns that also had meaning. Meaning, it was not, you don't just wear an ornament for the sake of looking fashionable. You are communicating. And some of those communications were, for example, a person could tell your identity in terms of gender, your age group, are you married or not, are you a wealthy person, or how many children do you have? That could also be presented by the beadwork, or even sometimes with relationships, yeah? You get some ethnic groups where you look at the beadwork and the woman is actually saying, "Hey, I'm single." You can, yes, yeah. So that was part of it. Or if a man is interested in proposing you, marrying, then if you accept that, then he has to send some beadworks to your mother as a confirmation that, okay, we are ready to continue with the marriage. So those were some of the interesting symbolism you find that we don't get anymore. Yeah. Now everything is very much about just following what is global. Yeah. Like if they want to marry you, it's just a ring and what, unlike the beadwork. Okay, so this is the Kavango group. Maria also mentioned about an exquisite hairdo, which you can see on the woman wearing white and red with beads. That is the example she was talking about, that how will she be able to carry that? Yeah. So now, for example, with her group, they are just wearing the costumes more for festivals. It's not something you are going to see them wearing every day, unfortunately. So that is some of now the information that, cultural information that we've lost because we haven't put enough emphasis on the beads. Okay. Okay. The next one, example of the Sand people. Yeah. It's a group that, I don't want to call it, Bushman is kind of derogatory, but they live out in the wilderness with the animal, very simple life, nomadic, they move around. Yes, so that is an example of the kind of beadwork they use. So the beading is, you could wear it as a headband or a necklace or a waistband or bracelet, anklet, and within all those different areas, you are still communicating. This is a research that can be explored. So I don't really have much information on why she wearing that beadwork that way. What is the meaning of the color? Because even with color, it also plays a role as well. And then on the other slide, we have an image of a belt from the Ovahimba people. And I mentioned before that how you adorn the beadwork, it also communicated, for example, relationship or how many children. So, for example, the brown belts that you see, which has ostrich eggshells, seeds, metal beads. With this group, you just need to look at that group, the beading, and you can tell this woman has children, or this woman does not have children, or no, this woman is interested in a relationship. Yeah, so those are some of examples from the cultural group. And just to add on, when we research pre-colonial costumes, the materials that they created the beadwork from were very much natural, varies from the environment. It was not the industrial beads that you see now. As you can see, there's colors there, but if we have to really research and look 200 years ago, it would probably be a combination of seeds or wooden beads, metal beads, ostrich eggshell, and I actually bought some for you. It's a piece I'm looking just to see. I have an example here of the ostrich eggshell, and this can be bones or, yeah, I know these in the past it was ivory. Beads, yeah. These are the natural beads, yeah, that they would use in the past. What else? Oyster shell beads as well. Bones, some beads were made from bone seed. Yes, so those were some of the examples that you get in the past. But now with industrial beads, it has changed a bit. And I'm happy that there is this hype now where people actually want to embrace their original traditional costumes. So this is a current one from my group that I belong to, our Wambo people, where now they are exploring these metal beads. So you can see, I'll pass them around, that beaded flap and the different ornaments, the gold, so that's what they're embracing now. And you will see this costume more when there is traditional weddings taking place. So our everyday context, we are just following normal fashion, but as soon as there's a wedding or a baby being introduced to a family, then all of a sudden the beadworks will come out. So that's what also made me interested to know, like, what do these beads mean? Why are we only seeing them whenever there is a ceremony? All right. So just to move on to the main subject of our discussion, onyoka beads. There's a whole hype about sustainable fashion. And I thought, why not look for also beads that are created sustainably, so that we can also encourage creatives to explore them. Although, again, traditionally, we also have a practice of we don't actually throw away. So all these ornaments that we're showing you, I'm not going to throw them. I'll keep them for my children, or if not, if you don't have children, you pass them on to your nieces or nephews. So Africa has that culture of continuation, so we don't waste material. So that's also something that I found very fascinating. Even I passed around metal beads, and those metal beads, they are making them from recycled metals, yeah, like from the car parts. So it's not like now. In the past, what they would do is there were certain areas where they would go and extricate the metal ores, but now, due to the colonial history and also the different laws that have been passed, that people are not exactly given free movement to just do anything. So they're a bit limited. So that is why now they are exploring with repurposing material. And through our research, onyoka is one of them that we are currently exploring on. That is how we also discovered that it also has a very sustainable method of production, and as I mentioned before, you don't throw away your beads, you have to keep them. So what is onyoka beads? Yeah, originally they were supposed to come from the freshwater oyster shells, where they were found in a river in Angola. So the Namibian ethnic groups in the northern part would travel to some rivers in Angola, and they do a ritual there to kind of attract these oysters. If I'm not mistaken, it's like they take some dung from the cattle intestine, throw it into the water, then the little oysters will catch on to that like they're eating, and then that's how they harvested them. So it was quite a process. And because of that process as well, it was considered a very expensive bead during that time. And so through the research, we found out that it's only the wealthy or the royal who could afford these onyoka beads. Yeah, and then I guess with time, again, it's not something that everybody had, only the royals and the wealthy. But where you do see that people are in need of this oyster shell is for cultural ceremonies. For example, baby introduction. Every baby in all the ethnic groups, once you reach, I'm not sure whether a few months or few weeks, but it depends. For example, we had a student who I will show you later who explained her whole process. So every baby will be introduced to their family clan, and that family has to bring some gift, and the necklace is a beaded necklace is one of the important gifts that you bring. So it's not just a necklace, it's also related to the clan that you belong to. So onyoka beads is one of them that they always include, is one of the beads that was included according to the specific clan. So those are some of the symbolic areas you'll see the onyoka beads being worn. You will also see the onyoka beads being worn. For example, we have initiation rite for young girls to usher you into your womanhood. It's been revived. So in some ethnic groups, I know for the Ovakanyama, they will also include this bead as well. So that is some of the practice. Again, it's also considered very spiritual bead, meaning there's one lady informed us that if you found it on the ground, do not pick it up with your hands. You have to take a stick and hang it somewhere and let the owner find it, because they believe if you pick up and you decide, oh, let it become, it's now mine, you might bring a curse to your family. That's what they believe. So yes, it's one of those special spiritual beads that you don't just play around with. You have to wait until it's passed on to you through your family or for whatever the ritual is. All right, I mentioned that onyoka beads are created using sustainable methods. So in the past, they were created from freshwater oyster shells. And then again, as I mentioned before, we are quite limited now because of all the different laws. So, and I'm actually happy that the craftswomen found new ways to create them. And one of them is by using recycled. Oh yes, I bought an example for you, onyoka beads. They are now using recycled seawater shells. Yeah, which they collect. We have different coasts, Swakopmund, Henties Bay, Walvis Bay. So they go in the morning and they collect them, and then they will crush them. I've shown a picture on the side, and then they will draw little holes into the different pieces, and then against a rock, they try to now form them into the whole that disc shape. So it's a hand process, and then they will string them, put them on a strand, and then they will sell them. And they really transport into the different regions. So now people have access, unlike in the past where we were limited. And it doesn't only stop there. There has been some other new developments. The Chinese have also attempted, so they are also selling plastic version, which I don't agree with, because it takes away that symbolism. For example, I had a friend, she has a new baby, and then I asked her, so where is the special necklace that your baby was given? And when she showed it to me, I checked the material, and it's plastic, and I felt bad, because it's about placing value on the child. So if you are giving them this industrial manufactured necklace for the clan, it's like basically saying you are not important, But then again, people don't have options, and they thought, okay, let's just buy this. But then you are taking away that cultural element. So those are some of the beads that are available in the market. Then you also get lollipop sticks, which I found was interesting. Yes, some craftsmen started collecting lollipop sticks, cutting them up into, and it's really finely. The one in pink is actually an example of the lollipop stick, which they cut into fine little disc thread, and that was an onyoka bead. So that is part of the development. And then the other image, it has a bit of rose gold metal beads and onyoka. That's just an example of now the seashell beads that you find in the market. So that is currently what is now being used in the market. So and I really appreciate that they thought of using unconventional material to try and keep the tradition still running. Okay, and then I just want to end off with this is an example of a necklace that was that a student of mine was explaining. It's also made from onyoka, and she got this necklace from when she was 3 years old. It has two strands, and she said one strand is to, I think it's one strand is to represent her mother's clan, the other strand is to represent her father's clan. Yeah. So in the village area, people are not looking for fancy looking necklace. No, they'll find anything to put the beads onto, and that's part of the process now of continuing the fashion. So one she got, it represents one is a combination of the onyoka beads with the industrial blue beads. That is to represent a clan, if I'm not mistaken. One of the clan is the elephant clan, and then the other one is onyoka beads with the ostrich eggshell. Yeah. So the two, okay, I don't want to mix them up, but she said those two necklaces actually represent, one is the elephant clan, the other one is the lion clan. So she's a university student and she's still wearing this just to connect to her culture, which I found really fascinating because I don't even know where mine is, Yeah. So that's where I thought this is something that we should really continue looking into and encouraging the students to bring those stories that we don't really hear. Because from here, I'm not sure whether she will go in the fashion or textile direction, but she can continue finding out more. And then again with onyoka beads, what else? I know that the Kavango people, the group that Maria belongs to, they are also making use of them. Maybe you want to add in?
They also wear them in the same way, but usually they're given to you, like we said, it's passed on to you from somebody older, your mom, your grandmother, and they were mostly reserved for royal.
Yeah.
Or if any other woman is found to wear them, or a man with a little string, then it represents it's either you are very wealthy or you somebody who belongs to the royal clan.
Yeah.
So they are very quite rare. So you won't just find them anymore. So most of the people are using ostrich shell now. Because this is quite accessible and a lot of the San communities, they still produce them today. So these are more accessible than the onyoka today.
Yes. All right. So yes, that's just some information about onyoka, although it's a research in progress because we just did the research in Windhoek, but we actually have to travel more to the traditional areas to find out the real connections with the onyokas, and even to find out exactly where did you find like which river, because the different groups live in different areas, and what is the meaning. Because for example, the student, she is from a different ethnic group, so that expression might not be what my ethnic, like my father's clan, is using. So those are some of the symbolism that we are losing if we do not document. And so that's why we're really happy to be part of this discussion and to be able to indulge in this kind of research. Yeah, so that is about it about onyoka. And so yes, this afternoon you'll have a chance. I'll give you all some, and you'll have a chance to attach your own meaning or whatever you want to do with them. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Not sure. Maybe there's questions. Yeah. Maybe something wasn't clear because it's quite a lot of information, but we had to narrow it down for you.
Also, if you have questions from our other projects,
It's also fine.
you can also ask.
Yes.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of questions.
And maybe what I need to add on, the original beads, it's very natural. Yeah, depending on the shells they use, but the one I bought for you is pink because of, if you remember, there was one image of the lady with a small child wearing a pink skirt. Yes, so I don't really agree, but they trying to kind of match it now. Where again, and this is where this kind of research is important, they use synthetic dye. But originally it was not synthetic dye. It was more ochre, like a dye that they got from a rock, and they added some beads for the baby. And because people don't know, and the synthetic dyes are faster, so that's what they're using now. And this is where now it's important to inform the community that no, just use the original. In the long run, it's actually more sustainable, and healthier compared to the synthetic dye. So it's actually just supposed to be in its natural state. Yeah. And then they consider it beautiful. So you see how it's changing the meaning. I mean, because it's pink, it's part of beautifying yourself. And no, the original states were also considered beautiful. And those are conversations when we talk about decolonizing that we also need to break, because the missionaries came with all these perceptions about what is appropriate, what is not. For example, with my research, I found out if you wanted to be a Christian back then, the missionaries expected you to throw them away. Yeah, yes. So this is where also the family wealth, sustainable necklaces were now lost. And so people should be informed. Yes, if you became a Christian, you had to shave your hair, remove your beadwork, and wear cloth dress, and that's how they accepted you as a convert now.
So, like, you needed to remove your culture.
Yes. So with these conversations that we're having, the students can connect. Like you see, one of my students was able to say, "Oh, I have one. Here it is," and then she could tell us her story, her side of the story, and how they are using it. And so that's one of the ways that we can also decolonize now the communities, by just saying, take it up, let's really look at it, what is the story, and then work around that to bring that kind of emotional attachment back. Because, like I said, you only see these ornaments when there's a traditional ceremony. If not, you're not going to see them, which I find sad. Yeah, why can't we wear it every day? Yeah, and that's something, even in terms of Namibian fashion, that's what we should encourage. That wear whatever you need to wear, but don't forget your ornaments. Yeah, and that's why I also thought, why not add in, just to show that you can still look cool and funky with your traditional beadwork. Yeah.
I think you're doing just such important work. I think it's so important, like, to, especially like when you think about colonialism and how much got lost. It's just so important to really like focus on that as well, and also like to think about, of course, people gonna interpret it their way and let it grow in different directions. But in the end, it's just super important to know where it comes from and how they were like used. And then I think it's not that bad if people are like thinking about new ways to wear it and like to also like make them their own in a way. But yes, that's super important work. And thank you so much for sharing.